Hello, welcome to the webinar, everyone. This is, of course, our weekly Tuesday webinar going over a particular topic and measure. Today, we're going to be going over the layout mode. And so basically, that's going to be the seams or the seam settings, seam tools, and the role layout. So as usual, we're just going to wait just a little bit so that we can let everybody join in, and then we'll kick off. Just a reminder as well, of course, that if you have any questions throughout the webinar, then please fire those through. We will look at them. If it's something that we can cover live today, then we'll do so. But if it's something a little bit bigger, then of course we will attempt to follow up with you afterwards. So just for those who have just joined, this is our weekly measure webinar. Today's topic, of course, is going over the layout mode, seams and roles, and a couple of other little features in there. So please feel free to fire questions through if you have any. And another thing to remember is that these webinars are always recorded. So if you miss a little bit, you have to leave early, you can always catch up later on. You can find that on our Make the Most of RFMS website. Okay, I think we have enough joined in. So let's make a start. Of course, today we're looking at the layout mode. So we have, actually let me share my screen, that might be helpful. Here we go. So we have a sample project here with these rooms over here are mostly irrelevant, but we've got some carpet rooms here. So what we're going to do first is dive into the layout mode just up here on our toolbar. All right, so the tools that we have in the layout mode basically are divided into two categories. You have either seam settings or you have role settings. All right. One thing I'll start off by pointing out is quite often when you, actually let me just set this product up a little bit different. Quite often when you first start using Measure, what you're going to find is that when you go into the layout mode, a lot of your rooms can have, here we go, let's turn that up a little bit. A lot of your rooms can have lots of T-seams everywhere. Here we go. So it might look a little bit like this. All right, we've got all these T-seams in here, and in some places it can be quite a lot. Now, some people like the fact that Measure puts T-seams in. They find it helpful, but most people, at least that I've dealt with, don't like that. They prefer to take them out. So one way you can do that, of course, is you can either right-click on the seam itself, and you can hit delete. Or, as you probably saw me do a moment ago when I set this up in the first place, if you highlight a selection of rooms, right up top here, you have a little drop down with the number 3 in it. And if you can see on the little readout there, that is the maximum number of allowed T-seams. So you can dial that right down to 0, and Measure will recalculate the roll with no T-seams in this case. All right, so you'll see that did not adjust the guys down here, so that's a per room setting. So what some people do is they highlight their entire project, and then they come up here and set it to 0. Okay. Now what you may prefer to do, and I really only point that out because often the default products have T-seams set up like that, especially if you follow the product wizard when you create a product, you might end up with those T-seams or that number 3 set in there as the maximum number of T-seams that Measure is allowed to put in. If you would like to fix that so that you just don't ever get those T-seams when using a particular product, then what we would do, so let's exit the layout view, and we'll go back into our product list, which you can also get to by hitting F3. And the particular setting you're looking for, so you'll see here's our 366 carpet. Right the way along here, we have a column called Max T-seams. All right, so you just dial that down to 0, and no more T-seams in that room or in rooms that use this product. As you can see, I have most of my products set to 0. All right, so we're going to go back in here. And of course, I mean, we set it back to 0 before anyway, but now we have no T-seams. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't add T-seams in yourself. Let's say, for example, this room here. Let's say that we wanted to put a cross joint in there. The word T-seam is just the American term for cross joint. So if I say T-seam or cross joint today, it just means the same thing. And same thing if you see that terminology throughout Measure. All right, so you can come down here And let's say we want to split this cut here in half. We want to put a cross join in there. There are two ways you can do that. You can either right click on the room and you will get a context menu that has T-seam or length join. So maybe we want to hit on T-seam. And then basically you'll get a crosshair, a red crosshair appear. You click and it will place a cross join just along there like that. So you can, of course, manually put the cross joins in. And that's what most people tend to do. And I think that's the way that makes the most sense. Those three options we had in that context menu can also be found up here in the seam section. I think it's worth pointing out that you can get to this context menu because generally it is going to be a little bit quicker to access those options through here. What you probably have just noticed also is that the seams in this room are now blue, whereas the seams in these other rooms, they are black, or a dashed white and black. So this can sometimes be a point of a little bit of confusion to measure as to what the difference between those two is and what the behaviors are between the two. So just let me demonstrate that. If we come over to this room, which has a white and black dash seam, if I pick this join up and I drag it, let's say right over to the side of the room, you will see that to accommodate, Measure has brought a new join in over from the side, and of course it has to do that because we can't have cuts wider than the roll. But for example, if I tried to do the same thing on this room over here, if I tried to bring this guy right over, I'm going to get this message. Moving that seam to that position is going to make a cut wider than the roll. So Measure has still recognized that that cut would be wider than the roll, but the difference here is that it has not pulled a new seam in from the side. So the difference between the blue seams and the black seams is that when they're black, Measure is going to assist you. It's going to assume that if you pulled this cut over, you probably wanted to pull another one over from this side. Now that, generally speaking, is very useful, but there are some cases where it's not. Sometimes you have everything where you want. You just want to move one join, and you don't want everything else to move. So you can have the seams turn this blue and white color by either adding a seam in, deleting a seam, or if you just want to send it straight into that mode without having to add or remove anything, then you have a lock button up here. So you can say, I would like to lock this room so that Measure no longer assists, or it no longer pulls new seams in from the side whenever I move something. All right, if you have any more questions on that or would like further clarification on that particular tool, then just let me know and we can cover that. A couple of other options or tools that I'd like to point out up in this section here. So as you can probably see, it's called Seams, whereas this one over here is called Roll. So all the options in this section here pertain specifically to the placing, moving and managing of joins. Whereas all the settings in this section here, they're almost entirely to do with everything over here on the roll plan. So we'll come to that in a moment. But let's start over here. So one tool that's quite useful is this reset button here. Sometimes if you've been playing around with a room quite a bit, you've added seams, you've moved them around, and sometimes you get yourself, it can get a little bit tangled, and you think, I just need a fresh take at this room. I'd like to send everything back to how it was. You can click on the room and you can hit the reset button, and you can see right there that Measure has just reverted that particular room back to how it was. So you may even want to highlight your whole project and then hit the reset button, and it will put them all back to where they were. Another useful option up here would be the center button. So if we hit that, what you're going to notice down here on this room is that it moved the joins to either side, and it ensured that I had a full width piece of carpet running down the middle of the room. Right, so instead of you having to manually move them to those places, of course, you can just hit that center button. This other one down here, Flip, that is also incredibly useful. So take something like, let's say down here in the office. Let's say that the room started off a little bit like this. The join was on this side. And sometimes, especially when you're drawing lots of bedrooms and little rooms, you can get situations like this. And all you really want to do is take this seam here and move it right over to the other side. And of course, you can click and then drag from this point to manually move it to that side. But if you use the flip option, it's just going to mirror what's in the room. So with the seam over this side, we'll hit flip, and it will just swap it to the other side. And of course, as you probably saw before, you can access that flip option from the right-click context menu. right? So generally when I'm working around with seams, I almost always just use the right-click menu because it's so much more convenient than moving up top here. Another interesting tool that you've got is the Set Edge button. So when you hit on Set Edge and you then move your mouse over the room, wherever you click, that is where measure will begin the seams. So on smaller rooms like this, it's probably not too dissimilar from just simply moving the seams. But if you imagine on a much larger project, where you have potentially 4 or 5 different joins, or maybe even more, and something like a foyer, maybe a commercial project, it can be quite useful to just pick a point where this is where the seams begin from, and everything moves outwards from there. There is one other option in here. It doesn't come up very often at all. It's quite rare, but you do have an angled cut option. So the way the angled cut option works is when you activate it, kind of like placing a doorway, you get those red dots that float around the perimeter. So you get to place 2 of these, and as you can see, it's going to be drawing a straight line from point A to point B when I'm about to place the second dot, and then measure will form an angled seam straight through there. And you can see on the roll plan as well that's been reflected. So it's not often that you'll probably need to use this, but it's handy to know it's there. So let me reset the seams in that room. All right. One other thing I'd like to point out is, so if we take something like this room down here, what you've probably come across at some point in the past, if I zoom in really far here, is the fact that there seems to be a limit with how far you can move cuts over to the wall. You can see that I can't bring it over closer than 8 centimeters. I can move it away, of course, but I can't bring it any closer than 8 centimeters. There is a setting in measure options that controls the minimum width that a cut can be. Now, the cutoff point, or the limit to that setting, is around about 8 centimeters, or I think it's 7.6, I think. So you can't make that setting any smaller than that. But that is why you won't be able to pull your cuts in any closer. And that's a bit more of a practical setting. Your layers probably don't want to work with, for example, a 1 centimeter wide piece of carpet that they have to stick down the end of a room. That would be impractical and unreasonable at that point. So that's why the setting's in there. But the reason it's useful to point it out is you personally may not want any cuts to be any smaller than 10 centimeters, or maybe something a little bit bigger. So if we go into measure options, I'll just show you where that setting is. And interestingly, we can get into measure options right here in the estimate tab. We don't have to go into file and then down to measure options. So on the estimate tab right here, we do have an options button. So we click on that and we dive straight into measure options. So the setting you're looking for is this one here, minimum cut width. As you can see, it is set to 7.62. But if we dial that up to something like 10 centimeters, then now no cut could be smaller than 10 centimeters. Right, so I'll leave that up to you to modify there. One other thing I will point out while I'm in here that does have a direct effect on working with the layout mode is the performance slider here. So basically, it's on a scale of yield efficiency through to calculation time. And depending on where you sit it in here determines how long Measure will spend, or how much resources of your computer Measure will devote to figuring out the layout mode. Obviously, if it's at the higher end, it's maybe going to take a little bit longer, but the idea would be it would do a better job of figuring out the layout. So of course, there's going to be a balance in there. On a very large commercial project, it may not make sense to have it too far up because you might find that it takes quite a while to work out where everything's going. So, and it changes from computer to computer. So it's probably best that you play around with it a little bit yourself to see where, which particular setting suits you the most. All right. Let's move on to the roll buttons we have up here now. So as most of you probably know, moving over here to the roll plan, you can drag and rearrange cuts. You can just pick them up and move them around. What can often happen as you're moving these cuts around, because of course the idea is that you want to have a reasonably compact, efficient layout that is still good for the layers, but is hopefully competitive in terms of how long the roll is and therefore the price you can give your customer. What you'll probably find as you're working that out is you get to your layout and you think, yes, this is good, this is the best layout, but there might be some gaps throughout it. You might have something a little bit a little bit. Let me drag that down a little bit more. You might have something a little bit like this. You've got the cuts where you want, but there's all these gaps between them. In fact, I've just noticed, I think, here we go. Look at that. I had the cut width set to 10 meters. That wasn't very smart, was it? Let's put that back to 8 centimeters. Here we go. That looks a little bit better. So as you're working out with this cut layout, as I was saying, you're going to get these gaps appearing here. A really handy tool to know about is the compress tool. So if we highlight all of the cuts here on our roll layout, and we move up to the roll section up here on our ribbon, and we go into the drop-down box and we hit compress vertical, you're going to see that it squeezes everything up. So it hasn't rearranged the cuts, it's just pushed everything closer together. So that's a good way to finish off working with the roll layout or the project. Get everything positioned how you want, and then you can use that tool to compress everything up. Another great option in here, and this is more so useful for things like commercial projects, but there's this icon up here that's got a little green tick on it, and we pointed this out in one of the other Measure webinars we did, but I'll point it out again because it's really quite useful. You'll see that the tooltip there is set at Recalculate Automatically. So when we go in here, we basically have 3 options. And this is to do with when Measure will recalculate that roll. So when it's set to recalculate automatically, as it is currently, what you're going to notice is that every time you move a cut, Measure recalculates the seam plan or the roll plan, of course, as you would expect. But what you can probably see there, if you pay close attention, is that there's a little loading bar that appears. Now on really big projects, Measure can sometimes spend quite a while figuring out how to assemble that roll plan, especially if it's quite a large project, or even if you have that slider we looked at earlier, even if that's turned all the way up. And sometimes all you really want to do is just correct the seams that are in a little bit of an unusual spot. You just want to go through, make a couple of tweaks, and move from room to room around the project. Maybe it's something like an apartment building and there's a lot of little rooms. That's where you might want to come into this option here. If you set it to recalculate manually, every time you make an adjustment on a seam, Measure will not recalculate the roll plan. So I can go through my entire roll plan, I can make some adjustments. On a bigger project, of course, this would not be spending time recalculating the joins each time I make a modification. And then when I'm happy with everything, then I can come up here and hit the Recalculate Now button. Like you'll see over here, for example, that there's just nothing showing up in the roll layout. Recalculate Now, I can hit that button, and Measure will then just once go through and figure out where everything is going. One other option I'd like to point out, and I think I've gone and mucked up some of the products here. Let me just put this back for a moment. Yeah, there we go, that's better. One other thing I'd like to point out here, in fact, we should probably turn that back to Recalculate Automatically. There we go. Something else that's quite useful up here is this icon right here. So you have an option to lock and unlock the cuts. If you've been using Measure for a while, a frustration you may have come across is you spent quite a while getting the roll layout and the seam layout assembled, just how you like it. Everything's quite neatly locked together. But then you come back, you modify a room, let's say, or you add a new join in, and Measure goes and recalculates the entire roll plan, and you've lost that particular layout that you'd achieved. Right, so Measure, of course, had to recalculate the roll because the material it had to work with had changed. New seam or the room had changed size. If instead we come up to this padlock icon in the roll section and we click on Lock Cuts, you're going to notice that all of the cuts turn polka dot. So that's the visual indicator that these are all locked. All right. Now what's going to happen? Maybe this piece right here. So that cut right there, you can see it comes down here in the Hall 2 room. If I adjust this room, let's say we add a cross join in. you can see what happens is that that particular room gets unlocked and it moves those joins to, or those cuts rather, to the bottom, but everything else has been left exactly where it was. So they're all locked in position. Now in this case, of course, it's left a gap up here. Maybe you'd want to tidy that up, maybe using the compress tool. But the point being, if you lock all of your rooms like that before making a modification, then you can ensure that the worst that will happen is that the room you changed, that will get pushed to the bottom and maybe that will get recalculated, but everything else will stay the same. One other thing we will point out up here is the roles and lots section. This doesn't come up all that often, but it's incredibly useful when it does. So let me just unlock these cuts. And let's compress everything back up together. All right. So when we come into the roles and lots window, what you can see here is that we have a bit of a hierarchy pointing out how our product is structured. So we have our product, and of course in this case it's 366 carpet. But then we have something called a lot. Now that is more of an American term. We would call this a die batch in probably our area of the world. And then we have the roll section. So you can see that by default, Measure has dropped a system roll in here. It can have a total length of 1,500 meters, which you'll probably never quite fill up. And currently we're using 53.9. That's this guy over here. The reason you might want to use the rolls and lots tool is if maybe you have some spare rolls lying around, you have some bits of carpet of particular sizes, and you would like to use that in your project. Or maybe the supplier has come back to you and said, we have a certain size piece of carpet. Can you make that work with your project? So what we can do here is with this selected, you can select either the lot or one of the other system roles, it doesn't matter. You have a button right down here at the bottom that lets you add a new role. So if I click on that, you'll see I have a user-defined role that is dropped in here. Now, the difference between the user-defined role and the system role is that, number one, I can rename it. So we might say that there is a spare 5-meter piece of carpet that we would like to use. We've got it lying about the warehouse, and if we can, we'd like to just use it in the project. And over here, we would then set the total length, not 45, to 5 meters. Now, what's going to happen is when we click OK, Measure is going to recalculate the building or the house so that it uses a 5-meter piece of carpet, and then whatever is left over, that will then get put into a system roll. Right, so you can see there 5 meters has been used up, and that looks like it's utilizing it quite nicely. So we've tidied up that hypothetical 5-meter piece of carpet we have lying around in the warehouse. So you could take that further. You can, when you've got one of these rolls in here, you can keep adding as many rolls as you want, depending on how many different sizes you're trying to work with. So if we came in here and said we had another 20-meter roll, and then maybe we had, let's say, a 28-meter roll, just to make up some numbers, because out of all of those rolls there, the entire house will fit into those 5 rolls. What we're going to see is that the system roll will be dropped off and discarded. So there we go. Only 3 rolls are being used. The system roll is no longer needed, so Measure drops it off. If you were to come back into roles and lots, you can delete all of these roles, and then Measure will reintroduce. Let me just delete those out again. Measure will reintroduce system roles, and you will have everything on one large roll again. Something else you can do with the roles and lots, of course, is the lots half of the tool. So as I pointed out before, just below the name of the product, and this particular hierarchy here, the next section down is lot. Okay, so it starts off with a base lot, or let's call it a system lot. But as you can see that I've already done down here, you can add a new lot in. And so, as I was saying before, this you would think of this as die batches. So if you had, let's say, 2 die batches, and this house in some ways is quite well suited for that, maybe you could put 1 die batch in one half of the house, or 1 die batch in another half of the house, if that's how things played out. So we can have a second lot down there, and we might even add a roll into that second lot. So this might be something, once again, something lying around the warehouse, and it's a different die batch to, what we'd get straight from the supplier. So ideally, we wouldn't want to have it mixing with other cuts on the plan. So we put it in its own lot, and you'll see there is an add lot button down there, so you can keep adding as many lots as you like. You can even rename them. I'm just going to leave it as lot 1 for now, and user-defined role, let's just say 20 to be generous. So the way you work with different lots is similar to the way you would work with different colors of a product. So if I exit the layout mode and go back to the regular room mode, if I highlight, let's highlight the bottom rooms in this house. When I go up to pick a new product, you will notice that instead of just the regular 366 carpet, we also have lot 1 of the 366 carpet. So when you have multiple lots, Measure will create multiple products. Now they're all, of course, pulling from the one product, in terms of its dimensions and so forth. But it splits it out like different products. And then you can choose this one, for example, and we'll say yes to that. And what you're going to notice on the layout mode is that Measure will not mix cuts from this room and this room. You can see it's as if they're different products, which of course is exactly what you want. You don't want different cuts that come from different die batches to be mixing together, because obviously that's not going to look great in the room. That's really all of the tools in the role section that we have to point out. There are a couple of other tools up here that you can see that aren't quite so relevant. But one final thing we will point out, and we've pointed this out before, would be the importance of going into the worksheet section. So when you're finished with a project, or after you've spent some time working out the layout and such, the button's right up here as well, so it's quite convenient to get to. If you go into the worksheet section, of course, you're going to see a line-by-line breakdown of your project, but the most important reason that you would go in here is that whenever you visit the worksheet, Measure will run a math check on your project. So if there was a problem or some kind of a little snag that appeared, then Measure would bring that to your attention. You would see a box appear and say, hey, there's a problem, we should go fix that. And of course, therefore, you're able to deal with the problem. So even if just for that reason alone, I would say it is very important, or you should make it part of your workflow, that whenever you're working on a Measure project, visit the worksheet at least once. And then, of course, if there was a problem, you would know about it. Aside from that, though, that's really all we had to go over today in the layout portion of Measure. If you've had any questions throughout the webinar, then please fire those through now, and we'll do our best to go over them. But of course, if you have anything more in depth you'd like to go over, then please feel free to reach out to us. So we'll just wait a moment or two just to, if anyone is typing, just so they've got a chance to send their questions through. Actually, as a little bit of a bonus feature, something else I might point out. Something you've probably noticed in the past, or at least some of you, is depending on the lay direction you have in your rooms, the role layout will either appear vertical like this, or it will appear horizontal along the bottom. Now, some people really like that behavior. They like it that the role plan kind of visually, or in terms of orientation, matches the direction that you have the cuts in the room. Other people can't stand it and want to be able to turn it off. So the good news is that you can turn it off. So if we come into Measure Options, which you can get to either by clicking the Options button here, or going into File and then Measure Options, it's the same thing. So the setting that you're looking for is in the Display section, and it's this option right here. Change cut window orientation to match material lay. So if you would like to try with that option on, if you think it will be useful, then come turn it on. And if it's been annoying you and you don't know how to turn it off, then just come in here and toggle it off. Aside from that, though, I haven't seen any questions come through, so I'll assume that we've covered everything nicely. As I said before, please reach out to us if you've got anything more in depth you'd like to go over. Aside from that, thank you very much for attending, all of you. You can, of course, catch up on the webinar when it's uploaded to YouTube, probably within, or also on our website, probably within the next 24 hours. And aside from that, we look forward to seeing you again in our webinars in the future. Thanks. Bye.